This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations, a show about how to use your natural creative ability to succeed at whatever you are passionate about. This week's show is different. Normally, I'm the one asking the questions of our guests. In this week's show, the roles are reversed, and I'm the one being interviewed. Now, I've been interviewed thousands of times in both print, radio, magazine, TV. I prefer radio or TV as it's harder for the reporter to get the story wrong. In all of my print interviews, and there's literally thousands of them, the reporters have gotten the story wrong 100% of the time. Now, recently I was interviewed by Eric Veege of the Skeptical Executive podcast. At the end, I felt the questions and discussions covered a number of areas and topics you would be interested in. So with Eric's permission, we are sharing that interview with you. So sit back and enjoy this special edition of Killer Innovations.
Lots of companies claim innovation as a value. You know, we all know that many businesses were formed on the back of a single innovation 20 years ago. So there may have been innovation, they may have been innovative in the past, at one time, but now not so much. And that's partly because some businesses have just reached maturity. They've got a business model that works. They're making money. They've got a solid customer base. Or maybe they're just in a business that doesn't really need innovation. I mean, you know, the guys who clean my carpets, for example, do they really need innovation? So some of them have got innovation as a value, and I've actually seen that on the back of carpet cleaning trucks, for example. But a well-meaning consultant type like me or you, Phil, comes to a CEO of a business and says, if you don't innovate, then your business is invariably going to decline. And that's the assertion. But I'm skeptical. So you're an innovation guru. I'm obviously missing something. What is it? What am I missing?
Actually, you're not missing anything, right? Because there's a variety of different kinds of innovations. I think innovation does get overused as a term or a word that is used. But in reality, innovation does have a role, even in that guy that cleans the carpet. Because innovation doesn't always equal that breakthrough, game-changing kind of innovation. They can innovate the way you can schedule or reschedule your carpet cleaning, and that could create an entirely different kind of customer experience. That does also qualify for innovation. Companies that don't, put their head in the sand and are not focused on innovation or don't even think about innovation within their business, whether it's the carpet cleaner or the local hamburger joint or the leading companies in Silicon Valley. If you're not changing and adapting to the changing marketplace, look, your customers are changing, the markets are changing, your competition is changing. If you're not innovating, that means you're standing still. And if you're standing still, someone's going to go right past you.
I've got a client in an industrial area down here, they're big in the mining industry. And I mean, mining is just taking stuff out the ground, right? Are there any industries that are immune to innovation?
No, I believe innovation applies to any industry. Look, when I got named CTO at Hewlett-Packard, one of the first tasks they gave me was to do a turnaround in the PC laptop business. At that time, HP was number 5 in market share and losing, in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion to $2 billion a year loss. And in 2 years, we turned it around. We took the market share to number 1, and we were generating $4 billion in profit in 2 years. And the kind of the mindset was it's a laptop. How much innovation can you really stick in a laptop? You're buying a chip from Intel and software from Microsoft, and you're just like any other laptop manufacturer that goes to Taiwan or China to get your laptops manufactured. And we proved that wrong. We did create innovations. We did looked at unique features. We went out and really learned what the customers were looking for. So we created a product that they loved and they actually became fans of. So something as commoditized as laptops had room for innovation. My belief is any industry has an opportunity to really look at the business different, look at your customers different, look at how you operate differently, and all are ripe areas for innovation.
You've probably got some case studies. I mean, you've just mentioned one. What are some of the hidden benefits to a business of being more innovative? I'm sure that the morale inside HP went up. You go from number 4 to number 1. That's got to have a positive effect on people, being happy to work there.
Well, one, it had positive impact on the people, right? Because when you're an engineer, in Silicon Valley, and you feel like you're working for a company that's just being commoditized out. It's hard to get energized. It also had a positive impact on the share price. Share price went from, $27 a share to over $60 a share. So shareholders noticed it, Wall Street noticed it, and it gave HP a huge amount of flexibility with those profits to reinvest into other new areas. And part of those monies was actually then used to fund some of the other R&D in entirely different product lines, whether it be the 3D printing products, which now just recently came out from HP, or entirely new areas. When you can bring innovations, and innovations in the way I think about it in the context of, my experience at HP, is if you do really good innovation, meaning you're really focused in on satisfying the spoken needs and wants, and even the unspoken needs and wants of your customers, they will reward you with a margin premium. And with that margin premium, it gives you more flexibility to continue to adapt the business, to be the leader in your marketplace. It's that breathing room that just becomes so critical in these highly competitive times.
Those are fantastic hidden benefits that people might not realize when they start an innovation process. So if I'm a CEO, if one of my listeners is a CEO, and somebody comes and says, I want to be an innovation consultant, what questions should the CEO be asking to understand if this consultant is right?
Well, and you and I've talked about this on email back and forth with regards to a lot of innovation consultants that are out there. One of the things I look for if I was advising a CEO who wanted to bring in an innovation consultant is what is their experience, right? Have they actually been in the trenches? Have they had that frustration of trying to get an organization to change? Were they leading innovation efforts in small, medium, or even large companies? Size of the company really doesn't matter. You'll find that innovation is just as hard in small companies as it is in large companies. It's hard work. And what you're really looking for is those people, the consultants who have done that, lived it, been successful, but also have had some of the frustrations of, changing organizations. Because it's not just as simple as to say, bring in a consultant and, magically click your heels and all of a sudden now you're cranking out product, because it's transformative for an organization. You've got to think about your culture. You got to think about your leadership. You got to think about, how are you going to empower the people in your organization to really take that next innovation step? And you want somebody who's got that experience. So the first thing out of the gate is, have you done this? Have you led an innovation effort? I've come across, there's this kind of undercurrent of innovation consultants out there that haven't spent the time, really honing that skill around being, one, highly personally creative and having led efforts that went from product or idea to something that actually turned into a product or a service. So that's really question number one. Question number two is, what is their philosophy on culture and the kinds of cultures that work with innovation? Because you want to find a consultant who's kind of on the same wavelength as the CEO and how the CEO thinks about culture. Because if you're asking a CEO who thinks one way about culture to completely go a completely different direction, that becomes just even much harder. And look, all of us have our own experiences with cultures that we like, cultures that work, cultures that embrace innovation. And you want to make sure that there's some middle ground between the CEO and the consultant. And then the third is this consultant coming in with a pre-canned kind of process, or are they coming in and helping an organization adapt and adopt processes and systems that work for the organization? There's some consultants out there that say, pick up my entire system and drop them in and adapt to my system, or there's consultants that come in and say, no, we need to create and adapt one that fits into your culture, your language, the terminologies you use, your industry, and create something unique. I'm in the camp of believing that you can't pick up some consultants' magic 10-step process and just use it. You have to adapt, and then you have to work with your organization to adopt it. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to continue with my interview on the Skeptical Executive Podcast. Welcome back to Innovations. Here is more of my interview on the Skeptical Executive Podcast.
What you taught me is business likes to have business as usual. That's the business of business is business. And the business of innovation is change. And you had a beautiful metaphor. You called it the corporate antibody. So what happens is some bright spark comes with a new idea, and the corporate antibodies, make that new idea go away. So the question I'm asking you is, if I'm the CEO, what question should I be asking the consultant around the culture fit? How do I know that consultant's got the right culture fit with my organization? What kinds of questions should I be asking to explore that?
Well, I would be asking the consultant questions like, so what are the key elements of a culture that can embrace and be successful, right? If the consultant doesn't address things like the corporate antibodies or fear of failure or the way authority is handled within, or how decisions are made within an organization. Fear of failure, number one culture issue that we see in any company that's trying to adapt an innovation approach. That fear of failure is that it's not a culture that embraces experimentation. It's not a culture that embraces trying things. And if they don't work out, hey, no foul. What did we learn from this? How would we do this differently? Let's now go try a different way, because that one obviously didn't work. In some cases, in some industries or in some companies, failure is marked by, killing someone's career, potentially maybe having them removed from the company. That's not a culture that works. The other is getting an organization to change their culture. Let me tell you, it is incredibly hard. I mean, it'll be some of the hardest work you'll ever do. Even tougher in many cases than just getting a process into an organization and getting people to start, some form of idea management systems, and how do you do the ranking of your ideas so you're working on the best ideas. Culture is much harder than any of that, because you're asking people to change how they operate, how they interact with people, how they think about themselves, the confidence they have in their position to put forward ideas that may be viewed as crazy or, way out in left field. So culture is one of those things that if you're bringing a consultant in and you're wanting to really get an organization to be ready to really embrace innovation and drive that, then it really that consultant really needs to have a lot of experience in looking at existing cultures, identifying the changes to that culture, and then managing that change management.
Yeah, I mean, just to be a little bit self-serving, I had a supplier to the mining industry. We're big in the mining industry here in South Africa. And the MD said to me, please, will you help me with an innovation program? And I said, no. He said, what do you mean? I said, right now, this culture is a culture of fear. So and it's a very top-down culture. Now, you're the new MD. We're going to have to spend 18 months just trying to empower people, giving them a voice. Once we start giving them a voice and start letting them trust their own ideas, only then will we be able to start the ideation process. Only then will we be able to start an innovation process, because until then, the managers are always just going to shut down any new ideas because the culture just doesn't allow for it. And to this guy's credit, he took 2 years. And we worked with the culture and we started empowering people. And after a while, it was astonishing, actually, what happened. So what you're saying, Phil, I suppose, is that innovation is not necessarily about the innovation. Partly it's about innovation, but mostly it's about culture change.
Exactly. The culture change becomes really the foundation. Without it, you can go, bring a consultant in and do a nice presentation, get everybody all worked up into a lather, facilitate some brainstorming, come up with a handful of ideas, but then it dies. It is not sustainable over the long term. And in fact, here where I'm CEO at this company here in the United States, in Colorado, we took 3 years to take what was basically an accidental culture. There was no preconceived effort to try to define a culture here. We basically tore it down to the studs, rebuilt it from the ground up, and then also reskilled the organization before we even started, really focusing on an innovation effort. Because again, without the culture in place, you don't have the foundation, and anything you try to build on a poor foundation will not be sustainable.
No, I agree entirely. Going on to the next question, Phil, your top 3 habits that have made you a success in your field. What should we be doing?
Well, the question there is which field, right? As someone in the innovation space, what I focus on is I think about innovation, and more specifically, personal creativity is like a muscle, right? You're not going to get up off the couch on a Friday and go run the Boston Marathon on Monday. You got to exercise that muscle. So for me, I have a daily personal habit where I spend 30 minutes in the morning working on and just ideating, just coming up with lists of ideas. I identify a problem space for the week, and I spend Monday through Friday, spending my 30 minutes every day brainstorming on that particular problem. And then on Saturday, I go through the entire list and I do a ranking exercise. And a couple things. One is I solve real problems. I run a couple of nonprofits. I have a number of companies that I'm invested in that I'm not involved in on a day-to-day basis, but trying to help the CEOs of those companies. And it keeps my skill sets up to speed, right? Because when you really need to be sitting down and coming up with those ideas because of some urgent need or crises, if you have not exercised your creative muscle, then your ability to be a top-performing, creative athlete in responding to that sense of need right at that moment, your muscle's not ready. So for me, it's that daily exercise. So Monday through Friday, 30 minutes of brainstorming. Saturday morning, go through and rank those ideas, which are the best ideas. Then I prepare those and send those to whichever team's working in the problem space that I was thinking of, and I take Sundays off. So that's kind of the critical, skill sets and things that I do to keep myself sharp.
30 minutes a day, and that's just yourself and a notepad and a pencil.
Yes, 30 minutes a day, just with my Moleskine notebook. And I actually have a very specific version of the Moleskine I use that has a very kind of unique layout to it that allows me to capture and rank the ideas. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Here is more of my interview on the Skeptical Executive Podcast. Spend the first few minutes before I start the brainstorming with some form of inspiration. So I'll try different types of music with lyrics, music's not, acoustics. Right now I'm finding I've got a playlist on Spotify that's acoustics, instruments only, no lyrics. I find lyrics are distracting for me. And I'll actually test it. So I'll use the same inspiration for 5 days. How many ideas did I generate? How many really good ideas came out of that? And then the next week I'll try a different inspiration. I might do brain teasing puzzles. I'll do 10 minutes on a crossword or Sudoku or some other things to get my brain kind of going. And then I'll do my brainstorming every day. And I'm testing out what is the inspiration that works for me, and then measure myself on hitting my idea quota. So I believe in setting an idea quota for every time you're sitting down, whether you're running a group brainstorming or you're brainstorming individually. Because an idea quota, and I force myself to hit the quota, it gets you out of the habit of just stopping when it gets tough, and that you break through kind of the barriers of, you come up with like 8 ideas and then your mind goes blank and you can't think of anymore. If you've got a 25, a quota idea of 25, then you got to work it through. You force yourself, which actually helps you break through the barriers that typically cause most people that are trying to do any kind of idea generation cause you to stop. Oh, I got to 8. Some of these are okay, but boy, my mind went blank and I'm going to stop. You don't stop. Innovation's hard work. You gotta put yourself through it.
And is 25 ideas for a 30-minute session? Is that a good quota?
It's a good quota, but you got to keep in mind it's one of those things like running. If you've never run before and you're getting up off the couch, you probably walk to the mailbox and back. In the first week, and then the second week you're walking around the block, and then the third week you may do a slow jog around the block. You work yourself up to it. And the idea quota is not so much of a, the end result. The end result is you want to generate great ideas. So how do you do that? You need inspirations, things that get your brain kind of going. I read a lot. So I get these random connections in my head of, wow, if I took that from that industry and this from this industry and put them together, wow, I can come up with, something pretty interesting. And, But 25 is usually, it should be a pretty good target. First out of the gate, you might be doing, 10 or get to a dozen. Then you might get to 15 or 16, and then you build yourself up to 25. But 25 in a 30-minute, once you get into the groove, should be one that you should be able to click along at pretty easily. I can do, 35 or 40 in a 30-minute session. But, that's also years and years and years of, exercising the muscle, doing these exercises every day, but if you want to be able to have that muscle to call on as needed, you need to exercise it.
No, that makes sense. The other thing I always admire about you is your trend safaris. How do you go about spotting trends?
Yeah, the trend safaris. So a couple times a year, I'll take some trips. One of them that I take every year is I go to the main TED event. So I just came back. I just came back from Vancouver, which is where now TED is held every year. And as Chris Anderson, who runs TED, says, it's the 1 week brain spa. So you can sit back and hear interesting speakers and cause you to think. But my trend safaris, really, I go into entirely different kinds of, industries and areas. So when I was at HP and we were heavily into trying to design really top-notch consumer products, what we would do is we go to the Hanover Furniture Fair. So you go to Hanover, Germany, and you're looking at where furniture design is going, which kind of gives you a hint of what the living room is going to look like, 5 years from now. What are the new colors, those kinds of things. But for me, the trend safari is going into analogous or completely different industries and seeing what they're doing. So I'll take a group of people with me. I'll take, some of my staff. I'll take people from other companies, other innovation leaders, and we'll go, and we'll do these trips. And I tend to do them, over and over again from the standpoint of once we get on the road, we'll do 2 days of the Hanover Furniture Fair. We'll go to Paris, to the Louvre, look for inspiration in the form of art and architecture. We'll go to Detroit in the automotive industry and get inspiration from the design teams and the technologists in automotive. We'll go to Silicon Valley. We'll go to Tokyo. And it's really about looking for what's that thing that's not now, but it's going to be coming in 3 to 5 years, and what inspiration that gives you. Because the auto manufacturer works on kind of a 5-year forward view. If you look at the models now, those will be cars in 5 years. Furniture, it's like 3 years out. Consumer electronics tends to be much shorter. You're in 18 months to 2 years out. But you're looking for kind of trying to find those things that other industries are looking to bring in and see if it gives you any kind of insight into the market and customers that you're looking to serve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you obviously do a debrief every day just to reflect on what you've learned.
Yeah, we do that. We also are big on taking pictures and videos and doing interviews. And then I share those on my podcast and my radio show to my listeners to try to give them a little bit of insight of some weak signals, that are coming in. And we look for these weak signals, which are really the things that tell you that, hey, something's about to happen, but it's pretty weak. You got to really have your eyes and ears open. And what I found is you just can't be sitting behind your desk and just think you're gonna come up with these. You got to go interact with people. You got to interact with people who are looking in the spaces that they're experts in, and connect those dots. That's really where, as an innovator, you can deliver a lot of value to your clients or to the organizations you're part of.
So what weak signals did you pick up at your Brain Spa, the TED conference this year?
One was, there's obviously a lot of really great speakers. Ray Kurzweil, who's the chief futurist for Google, was there, and Ray was talking a lot about, the future of human-computer interaction. It's been, we've been talking about in science fiction books for millennia. But Ray was, really getting into, what he thinks are the near-term, mid-term, and long-term. Jaron Lanier, he's basically the father of virtual reality. He did a talk. His talk's actually already up on TED. I think this morning I checked it was 480,000 views.
Wow.
And he was talking about AI and really the issue of AI. Plus, he had kind of an interesting view of the role of privacy. And it's a top topic now with what's going on at Facebook and Google and others with consumers pushing back on the privacy issues that people are giving up control of all this data, and then this data turns around and gets used against them. So Jaron's talk was really interesting. And then really the one, Steve Pinker, he's the author of a book called Enlightenment Now. He's a professor at Harvard. And he actually did 2 talks last week, which is extremely rare. An 18-minute talk, and then they did another 90-minute session. But his book looks at the statistics that everybody quotes to kind of create this alarmist attitude that the world's coming to an end and society's in trouble. And in an 18-minute talk, he did 52 slides to prove that all the statistics that everybody's using is all bogus, And let me tell you, in a crowd like TED, that got a lot of attention and generated a lot of conversation. What are the real issues? Do you just ignore it now? Oh, everything's fine. You don't have to worry about things like global warming or, death rates from handguns and all these other, Steve showed all these slides that says, look, I think his one that I like was, even the acts of God, you're like something like 37 times less likely to get struck by lightning today than you were in 1950. And he showed all these statistics. It was pretty enlightening. I think it was kind of forced you to look at the problems and the things that people are focused on differently. And that's what I look for. I look for really smart people who have really interesting questions. I'm really focused on the questions people ask and questions that would cause me to look at the problem differently. That's the key, because we all tend to look at the problem the exact same way we've always looked at it based on our experience in education and those kinds of things. You need something that jars you to look at a problem or look at an opportunity with fresh eyes, with a completely different perspective than you've been looking at that same space for years. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. Welcome back to the show. Let's continue with my interview with the Skeptical Executive Podcast.
Phil, what is one question that people ask that you find yourself answering over and over again around innovation?
Well, I think the one question I get a lot is people just don't think of themselves as being innovative. It's I could never be innovative, or it's not me, or can anybody really be innovative? And my answer to that question is everybody is highly creative. Everybody. We're born as creative beings. I now have 5 grandkids. I had 3 kids, 5 grandkids now. And I look at my grandkids, right? Liam, he's my 5-year-old grandson. That kid can take anything, toilet paper roll, empty paper towel roll, and he will create his own storyline, his own game. He was trying to teach me a game the other night, and he was telling Papa, you're not following the rules. And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, I don't know what the rules are because this is a game in his head. But highly, highly creative. And I've done this test. You go into a kindergarten class and you ask, a bunch of 5-year-olds, sing me a new song, show me some of your artwork, show me a dance that you create or whatever. Every kid in the classroom wants to do it. Now you ask that same question every grade up until just before they go away to university or college, and you go from an entire class to maybe one kid in the entire school, right? And it's usually the weird kid that nobody wants to eat lunch with. But we basically,
an indictment, isn't it?
It is, because in education we're taught conformity. You want to look the same, you want to act the same. If you're a little bit different, you do not want to stand out because that puts you in being a target to be bullied, and you definitely don't want to be doing that. And then nowadays, if there's been a lot of surveys of CEOs. The number one skill set that CEOs want to recruit for now is those that are highly creative, innovative, people who can help bring new ideas, into a business or an industry. So you're taught to conform, and then all of a sudden now you get into the work world, and now you need to come up with different ideas. You need to act differently. You need to think differently. You need to think highly creatively. And how do we expect our kids to make that transition from being taught conformity to now all of a sudden being taught to be highly creative? And that's why I think, and I've been talking about this for decades now, around we need to rethink the education model, and how do we prepare our children to be the workers of the future when it's no longer an information economy. Because look, Google's pretty good. If I need to learn a fact or look up a formula, I don't go back to my differential equations course at university. I go to Google and find a YouTube video or a Khan Academy video, remind myself how that formula works, and then I can apply it to whatever I'm doing. So the information economy is basically replacing the need for me to memorize. Where the economy is going is we're going to an innovation economy. And the innovation economy says that the value of a worker in that workforce is not about what they do with their hands, but it's their ability to generate ideas for the business. So if you want to be highly valued and be rewardly, be compensated appropriately, and is that you've got to embrace this innovation economy, or you're going to be that laborer when it was the industrial economy, or you're going to be left behind as we shift from this information economy to the innovation economy.
Where can we find you? What would you like to talk about? I mean, what are you working on at the moment that we can engage with you?
Well, the best way to keep up with what I'm doing is listen to the podcast. It's Killer Innovations. We're now in season 14. Yes, we just clicked over 14 years on our podcast. A lot of people are going, I didn't know podcasting was around for 14 years. Yeah, I was podcasting before iTunes. So they can check that out. It's a nationally syndicated radio show. We're covered on 35 stations here in the United States. I personally blog and write over at philmckinney.com. That's been my blog. Been up since 1996. So I've been doing that. And then if people are keenly interested in understanding, innovation and creativity, they can buy my book, which is Beyond the Obvious. It's available and online. You can buy it from all the online stores. It's also available as an ebook, both on Apple and on Google. And you can also get the audiobook. It's available on Audible also. But that's the best way. And you can follow me on the social media. You can just search for Phil McKinney, all one word, no spaces, and you'll find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc.
That's fantastic. And your Killer Innovations deck?
Yeah, good reminding. The Killer Questions card deck. So in the book, I'm a big believer of questions, asking questions. So I've got a collection of, now it's up to a couple hundred questions that I use in my own brainstorming or when I facilitate for other companies. We've taken the 40 that I actually talk about in the book and we put them into a card deck. So you can use it individually if you want to do your morning exercise, or if you want to use it in a brainstorming session with your teams. It's 40 questions, very generic, not tied to any specific industry, can be applied to literally anything. And that's now available both up on Amazon, but it's also available over at innovation.tools. So innovation.tools is an online store specifically for innovators. So you can get the book there, you can get the card deck there, etc.
That's fantastic. Any last words, Phil?
No, I think this has been great. It's always nice to talk with other people who are in the innovation space, and this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you giving me the time.
I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work you've done for the last 14 years. As I said, I think I was listening to your very first episodes. No, really, I was. And so your voice is very familiar to me. It's and I just want to say thank you so much. You know, in the early days, you used to sometimes say, the reason I'm doing this podcast is because I'm paying it forward. You used to say you had mentors in your early career who helped you for no thought of rewards, just because they wanted to pay it forward. And this is your way of doing that. And I, for one, have been a beneficiary, and my clients have been a beneficiary of that. And I just want to acknowledge the generosity that you've displayed. And thank you very much on behalf of me, my clients, and I'm sure anybody who's ever listened to you. So thank you so much for all your energy, Phil.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a blast, and I've got to meet a community of great people such as yourselves out there, you know, doing the work every day, trying to help businesses be successful. Thanks for listening to this week's show. Let me know what you thought of the special edition. Drop me a note over at phil@killerinnovations.com. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.